Well, are we ready to select a president yet? I think the people would say so. There's more to go. It's not over yet, but it sure does look like the Donald is going to be up against Hillary. That is, if Hillary doesn't get indicted. So that could be our presidential race, or the Democrats may have to get in a substitute before it's all over. But both of those candidates won smashing victories in the Super Tuesday primaries.
They sure did. Trump is the clear leader among Republicans, and Clinton seems to have the Democratic nomination wrapped up. But their rivals say they're not giving up. George Thomas has the story.
One thing is clear from Tuesday's primary results. Republicans are fired up, and they can thank billionaire businessman Donald Trump.
This has been an amazing evening.
Voter turnout in Virginia, Georgia, Texas, Alabama, and Oklahoma shattered previously held records in 2000 and 2008. While Democrats struggled to get out the vote on Tuesday, Republican enthusiasm is at an all-time high. Regardless of the difference in enthusiasm between the two parties, Tuesday's primary results had the Democratic and Republican frontrunners racking up huge gains in the march to their party's nomination.
The stakes in this election have never been higher, and the rhetoric we're hearing on the other side has never been lower.
Both Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump each won 7 states.
I am a unifier. Once we get all of this finished, I'm going to go after one person. That's Hillary Clinton.
But Trump's GOP rivals aren't giving up just yet. Ted Cruz won his home state of Texas and added Oklahoma and Alaska. Tuesday night, he asked fellow GOP rivals to step aside and get behind his campaign to stop Trump.
So long as the field remains divided, Donald Trump's path to the nomination remains more likely. And that would be a disaster for Republicans.
Senator Marco Rubio captured his first victory in the contest, winning the Minnesota caucuses.
I will campaign as long as it takes and wherever it takes to ensure that I am the next president of the United States.
And now Republicans are looking to the upcoming primaries in Michigan, Ohio, and Florida as Trump tries to build on his lead and his rivals hope to start catching up. George Thomas, CBN News.
You know, I listened to Marco, and it's like he's delusional. I just don't know. These guys, it's so easy when you're in the middle of all that and you're surrounded by partisans who are shouting, "Go for it, Marco," you know, to step back and say, hey, I'm losing it. But this business about, you know, my leading opponent is a con man, to keep saying that over and over and over again. I mean, it just doesn't sound presidential to me. But what role did evangelicals play in this? It's amazing how many evangelicals went for Trump. And our CBN News political correspondent David Brody is going to tell us his take on it. David, you've been out there with these candidates, and why are evangelicals going for Trump?
Well, I think there was a movie called It's Complicated, and I think that pretty much sums it up. But to get into the numbers, look, let's start with the exit polls from Tuesday, Pat. If you go to Tennessee and Georgia, Alabama, the Deep South, Trump is winning evangelicals by about 15, 20 points. And if you look specifically at the numbers, he's winning with evangelicals that make either $75,000 or less. They are either high school educated or have some college. And then when it gets to be college educated and making over $100,000, Ted Cruz does much better. Trump still wins those evangelicals, but Cruz is much closer. And so it's fascinating to watch the numbers. I think terrorism is a big aspect of all of this. Donald Trump talks tough. You know, bomb the oil fields. You know, we're going to take it to ISIS. And look, ISIS is in your face and Donald Trump is in your face. And I think evangelicals, that resonates with evangelicals, plenty of evangelicals. They like his political incorrectness. They think he's a fighter. He talks about fighting for Christianity. No one's quite sure exactly what that means. I guess we would find out if he ever did become president. But they trust him. They trust him at his word, which is fascinating that that this is actually happening, but it is. And I don't quite see how the Trump train gets slowed down unless somehow, some way, Rubio or Cruz or someone gets out of the mix. But even then, I think this Trump train may be leaving the station, Pat.
I listened to Marco Rubio on a couple of, they taped him and it was rerun, and I'm thinking, this guy's living in fantasy land. What do you think's going on in his mind?
Well, he figures, his campaign figures, the only way to stop Trump is to become Donald Trump. And that's what he's doing. He is, in essence, and they'll admit it, he's going into the gutter with Trump. He's trying to out-Trump Trump. And look, the reality is you can't out-Trump Trump. There's no way. Donald Trump feels very comfortable doing some of what he has to do to win during the primary season. But the problem for Marco Rubio is that this is not who Marco Rubio is. He's a young, energetic guy who talks about enthusiasm and brightness for America and the better day ahead. And then he decides to basically call out Donald Trump's spray tan and talk about body part. I mean, the whole thing is just not Marco Rubio. And so ultimately, voters are looking for authenticity. And the problem for Rubio is that he's not really being authentically who he is. And I think that's a big problem, especially in politics. The campaign feels he has to do this politically to win, but is it worth winning an election to lose some of who you are at your core?
That's very well said. Well, Cruz did what he expected. He won his state, and he had won statewide offices in Texas before, and he won convincingly. And he also won Oklahoma, and it looks like he got Alaska as well. What do you think about his chances?
Well, he's got a puncher's chance. I don't think there's any question about it. Look, I think what he's been trying to do all along is to do this idea that Donald Trump will be this implosion candidate at some point, that he will somehow mess up, and it never has happened. And so that's been a problem for Ted Cruz. So Ted Cruz is going to continue to point out the differences and see what happens. He's thrown the kitchen sink at Donald Trump. It hasn't worked so far. It's been very hard. Part of the problem here, Pat, if we can talk frankly about this, why not? We're on television, it's live. But here's the thing, with the narrative as it relates to Ted Cruz, it has gone south on him ever since Iowa. You know, he got labeled with the dirty tricks out of Iowa, and then Marco Rubio and Donald Trump piled on with the liar and phony label. And look what happened to his numbers in South Carolina. He tanked with evangelicals, even though he won evangelicals in Iowa a few weeks before that. And so the narrative started to stick. And look at Super Tuesday yesterday. What happened? He didn't win in Tennessee, Arkansas, Georgia, Tennessee, all of these places where he was supposed to win. So it's a problem. Evangelicals are questioning whether or not Ted Cruz is the guy, and I think that's a problem for him. And let's also be honest here, Pat. Trump is an outsider who speaks like an outsider. Ted Cruz, on the other hand, is trying to be an outsider, but he speaks kind of like an insider, and it doesn't quite match.
Well, David, I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, if Rubio loses in Florida, if Kasich loses in Ohio, you wonder what's going to happen. But it seemed like when Donald Trump was here talking to me, that the path was open before him. And if he talked about, you know, running the table, he pretty much ran it yesterday, and he's going to keep on winning, it looks like. I don't see anything to stop him, do you?
No, I don't think so. They have to hope that there's an implosion moment for Donald Trump. They thought it was coming. It hasn't come yet. I'm not convinced it'll ever come at this point because Donald Trump is too close to this nomination, and I think he can smell it, he can taste it, and I don't think he'd do anything that stupid at this point to blow it. And look, it all comes down to this for Rubio. It's Florida or bust. He goes home on March 16th, the day after the March 15th Florida primary, if he does not win his home state. And John Kasich also, Ohio, that's it for him as well. So this thing is coming to an end pretty quickly in the next 2 weeks. It'll be Florida or bust. And I think after March 15th, in other words, March 16th, we'll have the final clear picture of exactly what's going to go on. Well,
David, stay with it, buddy. You're doing a good job. I appreciate it. Well,
thanks,
with the death of Justice Antonin Scalia, the vacancy on the Supreme Court has become a major issue in this presidential election. And today, a divided court is taking up its first abortion case in nearly a decade. Now, this deals with whether a state can enforce safety standards at abortion clinics. The issue is, can they make doctors at abortion clinics have admitting privileges at another hospital? Heather Sells had that story.
Pro-lifers and abortion supporters agree. The Supreme Court's decision could influence abortion laws across the country for years to come. The court is hearing a case on a Texas statute that requires abortion doctors to be able to admit patients to a local hospital. It also requires that abortion clinics meet the same safety standards that ambulatory surgical centers use.
A hallway has to be large enough to have an ER gurney come down the hallway if there is a complication. That makes sense. That protects the health and safety of a woman.
What the Texas law case is asking the court to decide is this: how important is health and safety? And do the states have the right to set medical standards for abortions?
Abortion supporters say the Texas law threatens access and is merely an excuse to shut down clinics. They note half the state's abortion clinics have closed their doors since the bill passed in 2013. But pro-lifers reject that argument.
The law, of course, doesn't close any clinics. It sets standards that clinics are choosing not to comply with.
It's really an interesting and troubling situation in our country where veterinary clinics and manicurists and tanning salons are more regulated than abortion clinics, which involves an invasive surgical procedure for women.
No one really knows why so many abortion clinics in Texas and across the country are closing. It could be a declining abortion rate, but that's impossible to verify since the federal government does not require clinics to report their numbers. What pro-lifers do know, Planned Parenthood is making money. Its 2014 excess revenue, $127 million.
They could comply with these regulations in Texas. They just don't want to spend the money.
What's also clear, safety has been an issue for Texas abortion clinics. Planned Parenthood admits to at least 200 post-abortion hospitalizations every year there. And the state health department has cited 4 clinics in recent years. The violations include improper sterilization procedures, expired equipment, and expired CPR training. Heather Sells, CBN News.
Brilliant. Ladies and gentlemen, I just cannot understand how somebody can say they're pro-women. I am for woman's health, and yet at the same time they want some charnel house available for a woman to get butchered by somebody who is incompetent, and they don't want the latest medical technology available to women. And if a state makes that those standards, why anybody would say that's limiting a woman's access to abortion? The argument is absolutely nonsense, and it's before the Supreme Court. It should never have gotten there. That should never have been federalized. If Roe versus Wade was a disaster, it was called Blackmun's abortion. He's the one that wrote that decision, Roe versus Wade. And there's been confusion on abortion ever since. But it should be a matter of the state police powers, and the state should have the right to regulate the safety and health of the women in their state. And the idea that there's somehow a constitutional right to be butchered by some hack that doesn't know what he's doing just doesn't hold water. And it's a shame that Justice Scalia, if he was there, there would be clearly a 5-4 decision upholding the Texas statute. They may come out that way, or they could hold it off. They could hold the vote and say, well, we'll hold it until another justice is appointed. We don't know what they'll do, but that's a possibility.